You're listening to the Skeptics Guide to the Universe, your escape to reality.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptics Guide to the Universe. Today is Thursday, August 13th, 2026, and this is your host, Stephen Novella. Joining me this week are Bob Novella.
Hey, everybody.
Kara Santa Maria.
Howdy.
And Jay Novella.
Hey, guys.
Guys, this is the first show that we are recording in the studio for several weeks, and this is going to be the first non-live episode we're going to air in a month, in 4 weeks. The last four episodes were all live shows.
We made it.
I know. It was an amazing trip. So we're all back, obviously, from our trip from LA, Sydney, Christchurch. It was basically for like Bob, Jay, and I, it was 3 weeks, essentially.
Right. Yeah, because you guys came out earlier. I got to be at home at the beginning.
That's a long trip, man. It was a lot of fun, but exhausting.
Oof. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a tight schedule. I mean, we were, when we were in New Zealand, we were going day to day, new hotel. That was pretty rough.
Jay, I remember as we were approaching, I can't remember if we were at the bottom of the North Island about to go to Christchurch, which was not our last stop, but our last show, or if it was when we were already in Christchurch. Or at one point you said to me, it feels kind of like we just got here, but also we've been here for a fucking year.
Yeah.
I am ready to sleep in my bed.
Totally. And when we did our last show, I remember I felt like a ton of bricks lift off of me because, it's a heavy lift. Everything that we've had to do to get to where we got to, it just felt like, okay, we did it. We landed every single thing that we tried to do, and it felt great. I was so excited that everybody, all the people that came enjoyed it, and that all of us enjoyed it.
Oh, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, as you say at the beginning, there's 10 ticketed events that we have scheduled in the next basically 2 weeks. And that's a ton of 4 SGU shows that we had to produce live while we're traveling.
7 flights. Or was
plus
it 8?
7 flights, plus 2 conferences. Hello, that's when I say 10 ticketed events. That's in addition to 2 conferences.
Yeah, and conferences, I don't think people I'm sure people who go to conferences realize, but whether you're performing, whether you are coordinating and producing, or whether you're just attending a conference, it's exhausting. It's just exhausting to be present all day. It's exhausting to be surrounded by people when you're used to being alone a lot. It takes a lot out of you, but it's also really invigorating. It was so fun. We have the best fans.
These live events are always invigorating in that you get to speak to a ton of people who listen to the show, and they all tell us what effect it had on their lives. And
it's
never get tired of hearing that, of course, because this is such a big part of our life, and we dump a ton of time and resources and energy into it. So it's always good to hear that people appreciate what we're doing,
Yeah. And Nauticon I especially love because there's so much interaction with the audience, and we feature the audience so often that we actually get to learn about them. I feel like we get to be kind of invested in some of these folks that either it's their first time seeing us or they're sort of regular people that we see at every show. I always feel like I get to learn more about them as opposed to it just being, that kind of one-way conversation that we often have as podcasters.
Right. So what's our next big trip, guys? And nobody wants to think about it.
We all would love to go to Japan. I just don't see it happening because I don't know if there's enough English speakers there.
Yeah,
to pull it off.
I'm voting. I mean, we'll probably end up going to the UK next just because that's our next biggest market, or maybe Canada. But I still have this dream to do South Africa because that's probably our, what would you say, our 5th biggest market? Because it is an English-speaking market. And I know that we do periodically get emails from fans there, but I'm not sure, how big a show could be.
Yeah. So people do ask us, hey, when are you coming to wherever? Recently we've had a lot of requests to come up to Canada. And my answer is always you got to make it happen. We obviously, we love doing these trips. They're a ton of work. We only have so much room in the schedule to do these big trips, especially international ones. And it costs a ton of money to get us anywhere, right?
Yeah, it's expensive just from a logistical perspective.
Yeah, logistically, because it's all of our equipment. It's it's our support staff. It's a ton of people that we got to bring out, and it takes a lot of prep, before doing that. It's a lot of person hours, and
especially the M&M and the Reese's peanut butter staff.
Yeah,
those people are critical.
Don't forget about the Tim Tams, Bob.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just all that means is that we got to make sure that enough people are going to show up to our events to make it logistically feasible. So if you want us to come someplace, just help make that happen or help us assess how plausible it is. We definitely have, like, on our short list, no hard plans. We are talking with people in the UK about doing another UK or Europe-based event. Definitely want to do a Canada-based event. We were in Vancouver. This is like 10 plus years ago, but we haven't really been back to Canada since then. I'd love to do South Africa. We're probably going to go to Japan, either whether just for vacation or not. So if there are enough people, English-speaking skeptics there who would want to organize an event, maybe we can have that happen. And then
maybe Hawaii and Japan, if we were going to do something like that. I wonder if we could get a big enough group in Hawaii and do that on the way.
What about Hong Kong?
Yeah, or Hong Kong, or tie it in. I've done Hong Kong skeptics and the Chinese skeptics before. I think Southern China might be too small and also logistically a nightmare to get those visas. But for Hong Kong, yeah, it may be a big enough group. So we could definitely look into that as well.
But to clarify, like, if you want us to come especially far to your end of the world, get organized on your end.
Yeah, and if you already have a skeptic community, you guys already have meetings, you already know that there are, like, let's capitalize on that. Tell us how many people usually show up. Tell us how we can, get them all together.
But the next event that is happening, might as well talk about that now. We will be at Dragon Con this year. We haven't been in a few years. We have a busy schedule. It's going to be me, Bob, and Jay.
Yeah, I'm not able to make it.
Yeah, Kara's not able to make it. But we're going to be basically doing the whole weekend with Christian Hubicki.
Oh, great.
We're on a bunch of panels with him, mostly robot themed because he's a roboticist, but on all different tracks. We're doing, obviously, a live show. We're doing an SGU private show, which you can purchase tickets for. That's on the website. That'll be on Saturday night, 8 to 10 p.m. And a special person is going to be making their debut as a guest rogue on the SGU during the private show at Dragon Con. Do you guys know who that is?
I don't.
Shouldn't we know?
Are we allowed to know right now, or do you have to put it in the chat? Oh, okay.
It is my daughter Julia is going to join us.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Hoping to cultivate her into sort of the next generation. We'll see how that goes. Now she's like, I don't know what I'll talk about. It's like, I was thinking of talking about this, and she like gives me a half-hour lecture on this topic. I'm like, yeah, just say that, Julia. That'll be fine. That'll be fine.
Just bone up on that.
No, I raised her as a proper nerd. She and her friends give PowerPoint presentations to each other for fun. My God.
I love that. Oh, there's like there's a whole thing on like YouTube and Instagram and TikTok of people doing like PowerPoints about like, somebody's dating life or somebody, how things are going at work or whatever. It's so good.
I want to see some of those PowerPoints, man. I want to see like what's generally considered to be like their most well received PowerPoints that they created.
Well, she told me about one where she did a PowerPoint to her friends on which supernatural creatures are the most sexist. Like vampires, werewolves, zombies, or whatever. And it's amazing the argumentation, the detail she went into on that topic.
Wow.
Hopefully with citations.
Of course. All right, well, let's get into some news items. We're going to start with one that's a little political. By the way, as an aside, get this ongoing discussion about how political the SGU is. And our editorial policy has not changed on this. So our editorial policy hasn't changed. We still talk about topics that if they have a scientific, critical thinking, skeptical, etc. angle to them, but there has been a lot more intrusion of politics into science. So that's why we are talking about those topics. And this one that I'm going to talk to you about right now is a great example of that. So Trump recently announced an executive order called the Gold Standard Childhood Vaccine Recommendations, which is none of those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a perfect example of a completely inappropriate intrusion of politics into science and all the things that we've been complaining about, with this Trump 2.0 administration, where agencies that should be independent in order to allow, science, evidence, and expertise to really be guiding policy, and they should be insulated from excessive political intrusion, right? That's sort of the idea. You want scientists to be making scientific recommendations for the government, not politicians cherry picking only the science that they want. So in this case, this is about the CDC's recommended vaccine schedule. Now that means the list of routine childhood vaccinations. There is a committee as part of the CDC whose job it is to be up to date and review all the evidence and make recommendations about which vaccines should children be getting routinely. These are just recommendations, right? Now, in the U.S., states pretty much control these things in terms of healthcare. So how this gets applied is states decide which vaccines children require in order to attend public school. Also, what exemptions are allowed for that. And then, there are other agencies, like there is the American Pediatric Association who makes their own recommendations, right, as a professional organization, as they should. So what role does the executive branch have in this? Nothing, right? This is completely outside of their purview. This is completely unprecedented. They're not supposed to have anything like the president making an executive order about the vaccine schedule is ridiculous. It makes absolutely no sense. The details of it are also what you would expect with Trump and RFK Jr. standing right behind him, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, for those of us in science-based medicine, this is just an obvious, additional step in, RFK Jr., with Trump, their campaign to systematically undermine vaccines in America. There's no question that's what's going on. If you have any doubts about that, go to the science-based medicine. David Gorski has been doing most of this writing. I think this is 11 blog posts in a series called "They're Definitely Coming for Your Vaccines," and where he details everything that RFK Jr. has done over the last year and a half or so to completely undermine vaccine infrastructure in this country. So in isolation, this one executive order is not that big a deal because it's just a recommendation. It doesn't have any teeth to it, but you could see how it's laying the groundwork to further undermine vaccines. I also think it probably has a lot to do with the midterms, like just throwing the base some red meat. But let's get into some of the details, right? So Trump said during this announcement, there's a direct quote from him, "Decades ago, children received only a small fraction of the vaccines required today. In those times, people were much healthier, and of course, the high rates of autism now observed did not exist."
Where do you start? Oh my God.
Yep.
If you could look at the history of the vaccine schedule, the recommended number of vaccines, of course they've grown over time because we've developed new vaccines. And as new vaccines become available, the experts decide if they, what role they should have. Should they be given routinely? Should they be given only to a targeted population? When should they be given? These are all public health decisions that are completely evidence-driven, and it's just a math game, right? It's like how do we make sure we minimize disease and morbidity and mortality. And
they are doing that.
They
right?
are
like
doing
that's
that.
the thing. If you tie it to the actual infant mortality based on these communicable diseases, it goes down when we vaccinate them.
So the number of vaccines given has increased as new vaccines have become available, but it's not that dramatic, and it's completely appropriate, and it's pretty much in line with other similar countries around the world. Now, his claim that people were healthier in the past that's a myth. That is demonstrably wrong. Obviously, that's a vague statement, healthier. But if you look at the big things, like let's look at life expectancy. It's steadily climbed in the U.S. over the last 50, 60 years. There was a drop during COVID, right? But that's artifactual. That's due to COVID. But it's recovered since then. And in 2024, life expectancy in the U.S. was higher than it was in any previous year ever, right? So we have higher life expectancy than we've ever had now that we've recovered from the COVID blip, right?
So we were healthier back then, but didn't live as long. I guess that's what happened. That's what's happening.
What what do you mean by healthier? Infant mortality rates are down. That's obviously very relevant to like childhood vaccinations, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Cancer survival is up. Infectious diseases are down. But of course, if you could choose to look at certain things, like obesity is up. Okay, yeah, that has nothing to do with vaccines. That has nothing to do with anything relevant to this question. This is a lifestyle thing. People debate about why we are having
cultural.
an obesity epidemic. Is it the food industry? Is it just lifestyle? Are we becoming more sedentary? Whatever. And of course, any disease for which obesity is a risk factor, like diabetes, is also tracking that, is also increasing. Was he talking about the obesity epidemic? I doubt it. I mean, I don't think he was talking about anything specific, but it's not even relevant to vaccines. So anyway, the idea that we were healthier, again, the very deliberate implication being that we were healthier because we had fewer vaccines is nonsense. It's factually incorrect. And vaccines have demonstrably made us healthier, have reduced infectious diseases, have reduced, childhood mortality and morbidity, has increased our life expectancy. It is, vaccines are the single most safe and effective and cost-effective public health intervention that humanity has ever devised by like orders of magnitude. It's not even close. That whole aspect of it was, of course, utter nonsense. And then, of course, he brings up autism. Now, the anti-vaccine movement just cannot let go of their autism claims. They just cannot let it go. And RFK Jr. is right there as well. Now, we've reviewed this evidence many, many times on science-based medicine. I reviewed it very quickly when I wrote about this whole thing recently there again. For example, the World Health Organization in a recent analysis said that an expert committee on vaccine safety has found that, based on available evidence, no causal link exists between vaccines and autism spectrum disorder. The conclusion reaffirms WHO's position that childhood vaccines do not cause autism. And that is the same conclusion that pretty much any professional organization comes to. You look at all the evidence over the whole world, country to country, whatever, there is simply no signal there. Now, a lot of that research is focused on two things: the MMR vaccine and thimerosal, which is a preservative. There's also been a substantial amount of research looking at aluminum. But in addition, there has been research looking for just any correlation between the number of vaccines that people get, how compliant they are with the vaccine schedule, et cetera, and any neurological consequence, including autism. And again, there's no correlation there. There's no signal there whatsoever. But RFK Jr., who is just a consummate propagandist, in a recent interview says they haven't shown that vaccines don't cause autism. They've only studied one vaccine and one ingredient. Now, if you track the anti-vaccine movement like I do, you immediately recognize that phrase, one vaccine, one ingredient. That is an anti-vaccine propaganda. It's also, as I said, it's not true because they've also studied aluminum, but they've also just studied vaccines in general. Now, we haven't done the one study that whenever you point out, they go, but you haven't done a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study. It's like, they're right. We haven't, and we never will because it's unethical. It's completely unethical, and so it's never going to happen. It can't happen. So that's just a denialist strategy to ask for the evidence that cannot exist or doesn't exist for whatever reason. But we have a mountain of evidence showing that there is no link between vaccines and autism. Now,
and to be clear, when you say we can't do that study, you mean we can't do a randomized controlled trial?
Randomized controlled.
Right?
We have observational data. You can look at observational data, which is what we do have, lots of observational studies. But you can't select people to not get vaccines.
Yeah,
you
right,
can't
because that's the standard of care.
Yeah, you can't randomize people to not get standard of care. That is unethical.
Yeah.
Because, let's see if how your cancer does with no treatment, and we can compare that to the treatment. No, you can't do that because you can't withhold treatment from people as part of the study.
Right, when we know that the treatment helps.
How about a long time ago before it became the standard of care? Did they do it then?
Well, no, because whenever the vaccine is proven safe and effective, it's by definition part of the standard of care at that point.
Yeah, I'm talking about before that.
Well, there were no vaccine.
Well, when they first developed them, did they do it?
They looked at the vaccines as they were being developed. I'm still not sure exactly what it is you're thinking about.
Are you saying that, like, okay, let's say the MMR vaccine, when it was brand new, did they do randomized controlled trials to determine its effectiveness?
Right.
Yes. And
the answer
were they
is
able
yes.
to look at autism outcomes then, or did they just not think to test that?
So it wasn't specifically tested because there was no one saying that MMR was associated with autism. We also didn't look at MMR specifically for 1,000 other diseases because why would we? You just look at all outcomes, right? You just look at the group that gets the new vaccine, the group that doesn't, and you just say, is there any difference in any disease? So that kind of data we have.
Yeah, basically you're looking for measles, mumps, and rubella. What's the difference in the measles, mumps, and rubella rate?
Yeah, but also
in people who
negative
get
side
it?
effects. Any
Exactly.
negative outcome. Any negative outcome, whatever that is.
And that's why we have all of this rich data and research on any drug that says these are the risks. These
Yeah.
are some of the things that can happen.
Yeah, the risks
There
of
are always risks. They're just very low with vaccines.
It's risk versus benefit. Risks of vaccines
Yeah.
are very, very low. Anything
Yeah.
serious is literally like 1,000,000 to 1. And
Mm-hmm.
the benefits are obviously huge. Now, the other thing that's so intellectually dishonest about this is they're saying, well, it's only one vaccine and one ingredient. It's like, yeah, it's the one vaccine and the one ingredient that you guys were complaining about, right? So they said MMR vaccines associated with autism. So it was studied and shown not to be associated with autism. They said, okay, well, it's not MMR, it's thimerosal. That's the cause of autism. So that was studied to death, and there's no correlation there either. Now they're saying, well, you've only studied one drug and one ingredient. Yeah, the two that you said were the cause of autism and are
Yeah.
wrong. It's completely
And-
disingenuous
Goalpost,
to say that. Total moving goalpost.
It is. And to be clear, the only reason, like when people go, yeah, but why those? Like, where's the data? Why is this the reason, the thing people are obsessing about? Because Wakefield made it up. I mean, I think that's the other thing that we have to remember. It was literally a dart at a dartboard. He made that up because he wanted to target or to produce and make money off of his own vaccine that didn't have that.
So Let me interject there because I recently heard something that I hadn't heard before, a different angle to what you just said, Kara. The angle was that he had lawyers who were financing what he was doing, so that because the lawyers were ready to sue vaccine manufacturers. So are they both true? Was one true? What's the
They're
status
both
on
true.
that?
So
okay.
yeah, so RFK Jr. also makes money off of suing manufacturers. So there's a vested interest in sort of trumping up the risks of vaccines.
You can't use that word anymore.
I know,
I'm sorry.
But in that context, it was fine. Yeah.
It was deliberate. That was deliberate. No, but so seriously, for the anti-vaccine movement, the reason to point at vaccines to tie with autism was like over the 90s and aughts, there was an increase in the incidence of autism diagnoses. And so they're like, let's latch on to that. The vaccine schedule is increasing, thimerosal cumulative dose is increasing, and autism is increasing. Therefore, it's causing autism. But here's the thing. That's not true. The true autism rates are actually not increasing. The diagnoses are increasing because we've broadened the definition, because we are surveying it way, way more, and because there's been diagnostic substitution. These people existed 30 years ago. They just either got no diagnosis or they got a different diagnosis.
The net has smaller holes.
Yeah, it's like the joke is like your grandpa who spent his whole day in the basement playing with his trains. It wasn't just different.
Yeah.
Right? He was probably autistic. And when you really think about all of the different diagnostic criteria, there are probably a lot of older adults in your life who would qualify for the diagnosis, but it just wasn't culturally normative.
And there have been cohort studies where they said, all right, let's apply the same surveillance technique and diagnostic technique to like medical records over different populations. And guess what? They find the same rate of autism over in the 90s and the aughts or whatever. It's not increasing if you apply the same methods to making the diagnosis. So there is no autism epidemic. It's not like we have to explain some massive increase. Again, I can't rule out a tiny increase that's really in there for demographic reasons or whatever, but the bottom line is it's mainly a diagnostic artifact. Now, if you look at the CDC website, this is a complete travesty. This is malfeasance. It used to say there's no link between vaccines and autism. Now it says that this is not true and that we have not ruled out a link between vaccines and autism. The CDC website says that now.
Well, yeah, that's the problem with politicizing science.
Exactly.
We're seeing this across the board, across all of our federal, science institutions. They've either overtly gone anti-science because of pressure, or they've removed specific things that the administration thinks are controversial. So they're just kind of mealy-mouthed now.
Yeah.
Like they don't have a strong stance.
So here's the thing, and this is why RFK Jr. is a despicable human being, in my opinion, that technically speaking, you could say, well, we haven't, quote unquote, ruled it out. If you define that as demonstrating that the risk is literally 0.000, right? because that doesn't
Never
exist in medical science. We have not ruled out anything. The only thing you could ever say is that whatever risk is there is smaller than the size of the risk that the existing data has the potential to detect, right? Which is a wonky way of saying there's no correlation there. There's no known risk or no established risk. But the thing is, you could never say it's zero. It's statistically never zero. Nothing. No risk is ever zero, right? It's only as small. It can only be smaller than our ability to detect it with the given data that we have. And that's where we are with autism and vaccines. It's smaller than the hundreds of studies that we've done, the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of individual people in all the studies that we've looked at around the world, which means it's not zero, but it's in the background noise. It's effectively zero.
It could happen once every quintillion shots, but we're just not, we will never get that. We'll never get to that decimal point.
So it's completely disingenuous without explanation to just say it has not been ruled out. That's just bullshit. That is misleading. That is deliberately misleading.
Yeah.
And that's
it
what
essentially
RFK does.
has been ruled out, though, right? For all intents and purposes.
It has effectively been ruled out.
Yes.
Meaning, what we mean by that is it's so small, it's in the background noise, it's not even worth worrying about.
So you don't like any of this? That's what you're saying?
It's part of a consistent anti-vaccine campaign that has been, now being carried out by RFK Jr. under Trump in the last year and a half. It's going to continue. It's clear what his goal is to completely minimize vaccines. And he was actually worse than we predicted. You know what I mean? Like these are all the things that he could do. He's done all of them and more.
Thank you, Cassidy.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. That one guy could, Senator Cassidy could have stopped at least RFK's appointment. And he knew better because he's a physician.
Absolutely.
100% knew better. And that was a complete moral failure on his part, in my opinion. Anyway, we'll have to keep a close eye on this because it's happening. It's going to continue to happen. Jay, tell us how we could spy using Wi-Fi.
Have you guys heard about this before?
We've talked about things like
what
this.
kind of spying, Jay?
But tell us.
Well, this is both really cool. Like, this is common, right? It's cool and it's scary of what the potential is here. And it seems, Wi-Fi just seems
kind
like
of scary.
It's just Wi-Fi, right? It is. And it's everywhere. And if you think about it, like most of us have Wi-Fi in our homes. And if you go to a workplace, there's Wi-Fi, of course, at work. There's Wi-Fi in practically every store you go into. Airports, airplanes, supermarkets, any public space, right? Any place where you're going out in the public. There's parks that have, outdoor Wi-Fi. It's pervasive. So we're jumping from one Wi-Fi bubble to the next. And I don't have a problem with that because, that type of connectivity, we need it, or do we really? But that's another discussion. But the bottom line is it's everywhere and we all use it. A few years ago, it was discovered that Wi-Fi signals can be used to detect people. And I did read about that. I remember, I think it was 3, maybe even 4 years ago. But there's a new one that a lab discovered that can recognize specific people. So we have researchers at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology in Germany, and they developed a system called BFID. BF stands for what, Bob? They said that they can identify people by analyzing how their bodies affect Wi-Fi signals. And in their experiments, they were able to detect particular people with an accuracy of what?
85%.
Kara?
95%.
Steve?
95.1%.
99.5%.
Damn it.
Steve wins.
He gets the car.
It's essentially 100%.
Damn.
All
It
right,
knows us better than we know ourselves, at least by our shopping behaviors.
Yeah, but Jay, have they ruled out that they actually can? Oh, never mind.
So let me try to explain how this works. I've dumbed this down a little bit just to make it so we can get through it. Wi-Fi uses radio waves, and those waves, they travel through the room. They can travel through walls. They interact with everything, every shape, every texture, everywhere in the room. They bounce off the walls and furniture. They get absorbed. They get scattered. And of course, they interact with anything, including, people and pets or whatever, like anything that's in the room, including us. Now, researchers had been experimenting, using this phenomenon. They call it Wi-Fi sensing. This has been going on for years. There's a previous system that they used Wi-Fi to detect whether someone was in the room. They can track their movement. They can recognize like activities that they're doing. It wasn't very reliable at identifying. It could identify that it was a person in the room, but not the specific person, right? Now, those systems relied on something called channel state information. And let's just say it's called CSI, right? This was the part of the Wi-Fi signal that they were using to make these readings on the room and movement in the room. Now, getting CSI generally requires specific hardware. You have to have modified firmware. And it does put very legitimate practical limits on who can use it, right? It's not just happening in anybody's home. You had to modify the equipment that you were using to be able to do this. The new research, this takes advantage of something that's much easier to obtain. This is called beamforming feedback information, and I'll call that BFI, right? So CSI is the first version of it that they found that they could use, more complicated, harder to get to. BFI is quite easy to get to, right? I think, basically it doesn't take much to get there. So beamforming, this was introduced with Wi-Fi 5, which, pretty much, most people are using Wi-Fi 5 technology at this point. They put it in to improve the wireless performance. Of course, there's constant upgrades to these technologies. And essentially, instead of like just blindly broadcasting a signal in every direction, the access point, let's say your modem, can use information about the radio environment to improve how it sends signals to connected devices, meaning that it's going to send information to those devices and it will know where the devices are, and it could kind of concentrate where it's sending the Wi-Fi signal, right? Not totally focus it on there, but it just makes it a better connection to, say, your cell phone or your laptop computer, because it knows where it is and it can enhance the signal that's going in that direction. So these Wi-Fi devices will send information about the wireless channel back to the access point. That information is BFI. And here's the problem. BFI is transmitted unencrypted. No one thought to encrypt it, because why? Someone within radio range could potentially collect that BFI signal. They could read it, meaning they can use an instrument to read it and get the information that it's sending, right? They don't need to know your Wi-Fi password to access that information. They don't need to get on your network. And the person that is being observed, of course, doesn't need to be carrying a phone or other Wi-Fi device, because it's more about the beam interacting with the environment, not a device. So let me just paint the picture. You have your Wi-Fi mesh system in your house or whatever. You could be having it built all into a modem that you have or whatever, but you have a device or several devices in your house that are sending out Wi-Fi signal. And just think of it as waves of water or sound waves that are going out, just to visually see it, right? So they're going out and radiating away from that device, and they're hitting everything, and they're bouncing off other surfaces and hitting everything from both directions and all that. They can even go through walls and go through floors and everything. It does lose some signal, of course, when it does that. But there is also information coming back to the transmitting device that can tell now what's in the room. Mm-hmm. It's actually able to collect like a night vision type of idea of what's in the room, with some modified software. Not a big deal.
So it basically tell if there are people in the room, like how many people are in the room, which rooms they're in.
Yeah. So they tested different ways of walking, people walking with different gaits, walking normally, carrying a backpack, carrying a crate faster, passing through a turnstile, like all these different human activities. Then they trained a straightforward machine learning system that would recognize individuals from these Wi-Fi measurements. So it's just a bunch of data, Kara, that they're giving to a very vanilla machine learning system that could sift through the data, figure out what it is that it's seeing, right? Like I guess they give it starting information, so it has a starting point, but it learns to identify a backpack, it learns to identify a human from a cat, and it learns the shape of people's faces. It can. That's the fidelity that's going back to the signals that are going back and forth to this equipment. It's there.
So how can this be like used nefariously?
I'm going to tell you. So knowing now that everybody's Wi-Fi signal that's using Wi-Fi 5 is sending this type of BFI, unencrypted BFI transmissions, right? And knowing that I just told you that there's enough information in that data getting back to the Wi-Fi machine that it could actually feed that data to a machine learning system that could identify people with almost up to 100% accuracy, an individual person, right? Mm-hmm. Now, of course, you would have to tell it who that person is. It can't look at you and know who you are, right? Yet, meaning like, if there's a picture of Kara on the internet, it might someday in the future, it might be able to figure things out that way. But right now you'd have to say, this is Steve's, imprint. This is what his face looks like. And this is him. And anytime you see that face, that's Steve forever, right?
Right. Kind of like in your phone, when you, like your photos, you have to like first label people and then it can track them after that. Yeah.
So it's way more capable than the original version, the CSI version that they came up with. Why is this a problem? First off, the information, like I said, it could be grabbed by anybody if you have a listening device. And what if that person already knows what you look like? And what if it could upload your information to their machine learning system to say, this pattern is Kara, this pattern is Bob? What if you were able to do that on a massive scale? Right? I mean, this is just the beginning. Like, they just discovered this. Like, no real energy has been put in to like make this super easy and make it so you can identify millions of people. Like, this was a limited study, but again, it worked so unbelievably well. Now, there's limitations, right? The study conducted these tests under controlled conditions. They had restrictions to the kind of clothing, right? There are things that people could do to dramatically obscure their gait if they wanted to. There is reflective type of clothing that people could wear to confound the readings.
Would wearing a tin hat help?
I think the tinfoil thing is going to come in here, Steve. It's coming into play. The system, they don't know if the system could do it if it was reading tens of thousands of people at a time or thousands of people. How stable are the signatures? These are all questions, of course, the scientists are like, let's try to answer every question, and all that. This could be a problem. Now, the simple question I asked was, well, can't they just make it so it is encoded? So, it isn't like open to the public that you have to, end-to-end security. Like, we constantly are talking about like, having things be secure on both ends. It has to be transmitted where there's a key involved or whatever, some type of security measure in there. How hard would it be to implement that on all the routers that are out there, right? It's basically a software update or a firmware update to do something like that. I would think, I'm not an expert in this, but, it's not that big of a stretch to think that they could add software to make it so these types of signals have to be encoded, but could the encoding be, broken into? Who knows? I find this really fascinating because it's a technology that it's just everywhere and everybody knows about it, and it's been benign all the way up. As soon as people realize that you weren't going to get cancer from your Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi signals in your house, we don't think about it. And it is very easily can be taken over to have massive security breaches, which I think could be troublesome. I don't know. What do you guys think about this?
I mean, it's like one of those things where I feel like I'm so saturated with privacy concerns that unfortunately my psychological defense is to just sort of not even, it's like we're past a threshold at this point. I'm like, everything's going to get me. So therefore, I'm probably not doing anything that I need to be doing to ensure my safety.
Exactly. We live in a tsunami of technology.
Yeah.
That, again, it's like the waves keep going over and over our heads, and like, which wave are you going to pick to fight against, and how, what are your chances of actually having it succeed? Like, But
I don't think we should give up, because I do think
we shouldn't.
That we just need to raise the political salience of cybersecurity and cyber privacy. They need to be issues, and voters need to continue to make them issues, right? It's easy enough to demand that the government doesn't violate our privacy. There's already an infrastructure for that, a legal infrastructure. Like they need to get a warrant or whatever. But it's more difficult to make sure that that technologies are regulated so that private actors can't violate our privacy.
Right, because to me I get why government violation of privacy is incredibly pernicious, right? Like there's a long, rich history of civil rights literature around this. But I think we sometimes are a little too, I don't know, like Pollyanna about the possibility of abusing power within private corporate, like private corporations, non-governmental entities are often the very people that the government ends up contracting with later anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's not just, oh, they're trying to make a little bit of money. It's so much more pernicious than that. And I think we often don't really think about, like, what's the old saying? Like, if there is no product, you are the product.
Right.
Right.
Like, we are the product.
Yeah. And try turning your Wi-Fi off in your house and see how happy that makes you.
Right. Exactly.
Well, that's the thing. If it gets tied to an essential technology.
Yeah.
You know.
It's the whole terms and conditions may apply. It's like we don't read the terms and conditions because we still have to use our email.
Right.
Or we can't do our jobs.
Or drive your car now, right? I talked about that not too long ago on the show. Like, just in your car is like the location where you're probably most surveilled, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, Kara, tell us about diminishing vegetables throughout the world.
Yeah, this is something that I feel like once I say it out loud, it's going to be a, of course, kind of thing. But I don't know how often we're all thinking about this problem that was recently, I'd say, summarized in an article in PNAS, in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. It's a perspective article under agricultural sciences. So really it's more of a, I would say, like a lit review of some of the issues that are facing us, that was written by some very knowledgeable people in this field. I say that because I'm trying to remember, but I think some of the affiliations are, like the World Vegetable Center. I think if you work at the World Vegetable Center, you know a lot about vegetables, or the Global Crop Diversity Trust. The article is called Reversing Vegetable Biodiversity Loss to Diversify Diets, and they make some claims in here that I think are important. Basically, the main claim is that we are facing a global decline in vegetable biodiversity, and we need to make active efforts to reverse that decline in order to address another global problem, which is widespread malnutrition due to underconsumption of diverse vegetables. So some of the big kind of problems that we're facing, number one, global vegetable intake is about 40% below what's recommended for optimized nutrition. And that drives a lot of problems. It drives first problems with children, right? We see failure to thrive. We see that kind of hidden type of hunger. Like we've talked about this before on the show, where an individual is both struggling with obesity and also nutritional deficits because they're eating calorie-dense foods that are actually really lacking in the basic, like, vitamins, minerals, and nutrients that are necessary to thrive. And what ends up happening throughout the lifespan when we don't eat enough vegetables? What do you guys think?
It's not good.
It's not good, right?
Yeah.
Like, and the World Health Organization says that it's probably one of the top 5 dietary risk factors driving the global burden of disease. So when we think about the big killers, cardiovascular disease, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, GI cancers, these big killers are often directly, like we have very good evidence to directly link those to diet, and especially to poor diet and nutritionally devoid diets. But also there are other problems when we don't have enough vegetables accessible to individuals, especially when the reason we don't have enough vegetables accessible to individuals, which we know is a multifactorial problem, right? We know there's an economic problem. We know that there are land use problems. But when we're specifically focusing on biodiversity loss, why do you think, or how do you think, maybe both, how and why is vegetable biodiversity so low?
I think it's primarily due to the market forces in the agricultural industry, right? So if they're going to favor vegetables that are profitable, that are shippable, that are, highly productive, and if that's your primary outcome is like how much money can I make on a plot of land growing vegetables, this, but you're going to choose the vegetables. Everyone's going to want to grow the most profitable vegetables, right? And therefore that reduces the biodiversity.
Absolutely. So not only does the industry itself not favor vegetables like human food, because it has the lowest sort of ROI, but you're 100% right that these sort of high commercial value crops are taking up space in the market. And what ends up being neglected, at least according to the authors, are what they call nutrient-dense regional opportunity crops. And we'll talk about what some of those are. Some of them I had never even heard of, which is kind of the point here, right? And so what happens then when we have an industrial agricultural focus on high commercial value crops? Well, I mean, we've talked about some of these big issues like habitat loss and environmental degradation that can happen when we are growing, like monocropping specific vegetables and actually not allowing some vegetables that may have historically grown, whether they're like wild varietals, which we know that some wild varietals are not very edible, but there still are quite a few opportunity crops where wild varietals would be edible and they would sort of naturally grow in certain regions, but we've kind of clear cut those regions in order to grow commercially viable crops. Also, so a lot of these decision making has driven extinction. About a quarter of wild vegetable relatives right now are facing just full extinction. So good food crops that we could be having, that we're choosing not to grow agriculturally and put sort of effort into growing, a quarter of those are like at threat of going extinct, and some already have. And so what then ends up happening? Well, we have biodiversity loss, like I mentioned at the beginning, right? We've got an intake that's 40% below recommended dietary levels. We've got nutritional deficiencies that are stunting growth in children and also leading to chronic disease in adults. We've got biodiversity loss. The authors of the article cite that 80% of genetic erosion studies report significant loss. So like when they look across all of the literature, they're seeing just a massive trend of it's only going down. It's not staying even and it's not going up. And then what ends up happening when you have, let's say, these handful, and we're talking dozens, really, like in the dozens of varietals that are being grown across the globe because they sell well. And, it's becoming more and more homogenized. What happens when a blight develops?
Yeah, it wipes out everything.
Yeah. It's just uniformly affects the food supply. And so there we lose crop, which means losing money, but it also means massive shortages. That means that poorer individuals have less access to food because it's always going to burden the most vulnerable among us first. And so, the researchers say, what can we do about this? Their biggest approach is to start to increase heterogeneity of the global market. So they're saying, like, we need to move away from this westernized, standardized push towards eating just the same crops over and over and over, like these 3 tomatoes and those 2 onions. And we need to start looking again at what some of the more regional or maybe even culinarily like traditional and varietal crops are, and see if we can sort of make change by introducing them into more recipes, by valuing them more within these communities, and especially focusing on nutrient-dense regional crops. And so what are some examples of those? Have you guys heard of a spider plant?
Ooh,
that sounds familiar.
Yeah, so this is a dark leafy green that grows in parts of Africa that's very, very rich in micronutrients. And it's also been identified across the board as a priority crop for climate adaptation. So it seems to be very hardy and it seems to be very resilient to the warming planet.
But Kara, it's all supposed to be very bitter. And I wonder if that's also a reason, which we haven't mentioned, is that people are growing and selling the tasty vegetables, and maybe some of the more highly nutritious, resilient local varieties are just bitter. And
I think part of the issue there, it's a cultural issue, right?
Yeah.
Because given the option between eating a Twinkie and eating cabbage, most children are going to choose the Twinkie, and families often given the option between even a sweet, bright, but nutritionally less dense vegetable, you may choose the one that feels more palatable. But if you're in a situation where you grow up eating these bitter vegetables, they're part of the local cuisine, and they are the option that's in front of you, you develop a taste for them.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's the thing. We are developing a world where we are moving more and more away from health as a priority and more into kind of that quick, that quick hit. And it's happened across the world. And so spider plants are one example. Bitter gourds, also bitter is in the name. These are common in Asia and in the Caribbean. Also slippery cabbage, which I had never heard of. This is pretty popular in the Pacific, and it's very good at diversifying diets. It's a dark leafy green as well. And then pumpkin. We have pumpkins obviously all over. They're native to the Americas. They're globally recognized. But one of the things that we don't think about with pumpkin is they're very drought and heat tolerant. And they're rich in beta carotene. Like a lot of times carrots are the place that that's like really the only orange crop we're often eating. But pumpkin can offer a lot of variety there to get more color on your plate.
What I do in the fall when we go to the farmers markets for stuff is I get some small sugar pumpkins, and then you hollow them out of the seeds and stuff, and you just like make a stew in the pumpkin, and then you eat the pumpkin along with whatever it is you cooked
what
inside.
pumpkin is this? Is this a sugar pumpkin?
Yeah, the sugar pumpkin.
Sugar pumpkin. Yeah. There are a lot of pumpkins too that I have started eating more and more of because of the influence they have in the Asian cuisine where I'll go to eat. So one of my favorite styles of food is hot pot, and there are different kinds of hot pot. I tend to like more like Sichuan varieties of hot pot. So it's basically like a really rich broth with a lot of peppers. So you've got like this rich broth with like slick oil of like pepper on top, but you can also do it as a non-spicy version. Sometimes they have divided pots, and it literally sits on a burner the whole time you're eating it and is boiling, and you drop meat, vegetables, noodles, whatever in. They cook really rapidly. You fish them back out, and it's a very kind of social way of eating as well. Pumpkin is phenomenal in hot pot.
Yeah.
And so that's that's a major thing. I eat a lot of tofu and a lot of pumpkin in hot pot form.
But Kara, here's a question. So, because when we do travel, and we, either for the show or just with my family or whatever, a lot of places have a local farmers market, and those local farmers markets often have a lot of local like heirloom varieties of vegetables, which is great. I mean, that's what I think the local farms are for, right? Is to maintain regionally specific and also heirloom varieties of vegetables, which are not necessarily shippable around the world. So why isn't that doing it though? Why isn't that preserving these local varieties as much as they need to? Or is it, it's just not enough?
It's because the market's not big enough. So one of the things that we have to do as consumers is choose to go to those markets instead of going down to the local big box grocery store for our produce when we can. And I know that it's hard because it's often more expensive, but actually in some situations it's cheaper to go to the farmer's market or to do like a CSA box. That's one of the cheapest ways to do it. I don't know if your local community has CSA options, but very often if you search for local CSA boxes, what you're doing is you're signing up to be part of a co-op of a farm.
Yeah.
You're saying, I agree to buy a box of vegetables every month at this set price, and I'm going to buy whatever is fresh and in season. You're going to choose what it is. You're going to put it in the box, and I'm going to come pick it up once a month at this very set price. And that's going to sort of help the economic burden of the farm continuing to work. Yeah. And it's going to ensure that I have access to this produce. But
or
what
they
ends
could
up happening,
they could ship it around. I mean, they could drive it around.
Yeah,
It's like
they can.
the milkman, right? You have the vegetable man who comes by
and
with a
often
box
they-
of vegetables.
Yeah, and often
cool.
they do that. And so a lot of people just don't know that they have access to these. Most communities do have access to these if you're in a reasonably population dense area.
And what's it called again?
CSA, which stands for, I should know that off the top of my head, but I'm going to look it up.
Community supported agriculture.
There you go. Community supported agri. So it's like, being a part of your agricultural co-op, your local CSA box, as opposed to going to, I'm not going to name names, but a local big box grocery store and buying whatever is, just on the shelf. Because then you're literally going, okay, I have one type of carrot. That's all that they sell. I have either a red, a white, or a yellow onion. and whatever they have there is the one I'm going to buy. Or I have a, Haas avocado. Like you don't end up getting the options available to you. But part of it is a personal choice, right? We talk about convenience, and in that very last news item, Jay, part of the reason that we eat the way that we eat is because we don't know how to eat otherwise. We've been taught to eat this way. And so it is about sort of prioritizing, choosing diverse vegetables and knowing that it has really positive downstream effects, not just for our health and our family's health, but actually for the global agricultural market. It will change the way that farmers choose what to farm because the consumer is driving what's on the shelves. Mm-hmm. It goes back and forth, and we talk about this a lot. When you have limited choices, you're going to make whatever choices you can within those limited choices. But when you can find a way to be empowered to make more diverse choices, it changes the market pressures. Mm-hmm. And so that's sort of what they recommend in this summary article is, promoting vegetable diversity, as they say, to diversify diets, particularly among vulnerable groups and children, by including these nutrient-dense, climate-resilient vegetables into home meals, into school meals, but also integrating it into policy frameworks for long-term impact. Prioritizing this at an individual level, but also a community level and a global level. Simply for the fear of the risk of these things going extinct, but also because we know it will increase nutrition density, which has a buffering effect against chronic disease.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah,
cool.
It's something we don't often think about, right?
Yeah.
We're like, oh, I eat carrots. That's good for me. And it is. It's very good for you. But there's a lot of cool vegetables out there.
Yeah, there are CSAs all over Connecticut.
Yeah, CSAs are everywhere. They're very cool. Also, they do recommend if you are somebody who likes to farm yourself, like you have a small garden in your backyard or even like a countertop farm, save your seeds.
Yeah.
Save your seeds because that actually promotes diversity, because you'll end up with a lot of like crossbreeding and just interesting stuff when you plant your own seeds from your own produce. Mm-hmm. It's much better than just buying seeds every time where they're pretty homogenized.
All right. Thanks, Kara.
Yep.
All right, Bob, how many times has life arisen on Earth?
Aha. That's a more complicated question than you might imagine. I came across this news item on the Science Alert site, and the title was "Radical Study Suggests Life on Earth Arose Twice." And yeah, sure, that got my attention, but it's such a clickbaity title. It's so annoying. But the paper it's based on is fascinating as hell. It really grabbed me the past couple of days here, and that's because it addresses one of the major problems of abiogenesis, how life arose from non-life. So let's get into some of the details here. This study was published in Science Advances. The title is a lot better than what the Science Alert site news item has. The title is Intermediate Stages in the Origin of Metabolism in Phosphorylating Hydrothermal Vent. This ultimately deals with a mystery. They're dealing with a mystery here. And I'll ask you guys, what is one of the central mysteries of the origin of life that you think these scientists are trying to address here?
Wow,
how would you characterize it?
That's a tough question. I mean,
it is tough, right? Because there's a lot of ways to approach that question. It's a classic origin of life, chicken and egg problem here that they're dealing with. Specifically, it's about our metabolism in a lot of ways. So our metabolism requires enzymes to speed up reactions, right? Mm-hmm. But metabolisms create enzymes. So how did the first metabolism, how could it possibly have worked? Right. So that's kind of what their angle. That's how they're approaching this. And if you're not too familiar with enzymes, they essentially speed up chemical reactions. So they're so ridiculously critical to life. They could cause a reaction to happen in your body that takes milliseconds. But I recently read some research today that showed that without these enzymes, some of these critical chemical reactions that life depends on would take, how long do you think?
Longer than your life?
Longer than your life, yes. And one scientist estimated it at billions of years.
Oh, God.
Okay.
Even if right. But essentially, yes. So long that I guess from his point of view and a lot of scientists' point of view, life really would not be happening with enzymes. So they are so critically important. Okay. So let's look at their research. Their research involved essentially reconstructing a network of about 420 fundamental metabolic reactions. These are chemical reactions supporting your metabolism that are absolutely required. Without that, we are done. So they're talking about these chemical reactions that synthesize critical things like amino acids, parts of the DNA, and all from very simple components: CO2, H2, ammonia. So this is what they were doing, and they then worked backward, comparing bacteria and archaea, right, two of the top domains of life, comparing bacteria and archaea to determine which enzymes their common ancestor had and which evolved later, right? So what were those first enzymes that would have existed or probably existed on the last universal common ancestor of bacteria and archaea? That's LUCA, last universal common ancestor. So LUCA is all over this paper. So they're trying to find out what get some insight into flesh out, so to speak, what LUCA was like in terms of the enzymes it would absolutely need. So what would ordinarily be the result, right? Guys, we're comparing bacteria and archaea, and they're examining the most fundamental enzymes that probably existed at the beginning of life. So what do you think the result would be when you compare bacteria, the enzymes of the earliest bacteria, with the enzymes from archaea? What do you think would be expected from that comparison?
It depends. If they have a recent last universal common ancestor, they should be pretty similar. If they don't, they could be pretty distinct.
Right. I mean, but we're talking about these essential metabolic reactions. So generally speaking, you'd expect that bacteria and archaea would use homologous enzymes, right, inherited from their common ancestor.
If they're essential,
by definition. So that's what you would expect. So part of what they found is actually what was expected. The ancient chemical reactions themselves were essentially universally conserved, right? So these chemical reactions were fundamental, super important to life. So these were conserved, the chemical reactions themselves. But what surprised the researchers was that many of the enzymes catalyzing those same reactions are not conserved between bacteria and archaea. And that was a big shock, because you would think most, if not all of them, and according to their reconstruction, there was a boatload, like half of them, that were enzymes were just not there for LUCA, the last universal common ancestor.
So they're using the same essential chemical reactions, but they have different enzymes for those reactions.
For the bulk, for about approximately half of that.
Half of them, they have different enzymes. And these are not related enzymes. They're completely different enzymes.
Yeah, absolutely different. They're not just like,
not tweaks.
Differently evolved ones.
Yeah.
So this then gets to the crux of their main contention here. They propose that the other half of the critical chemical reactions were being catalyzed by environmental metals. So it was outside of the metabolism of these earliest cells. So that means that geochemistry could have been working in concert with biochemistry at the very beginning of life. And that's the crux of one of their main contentions here. But more specifically, it means that the environmental metals surrounding, right, that LUCA was within and meshed within, were potentially acting as catalysts, as enzymes, speeding up half of these metabolic chemical reactions needed for the protocell to survive and reproduce. So let's get to, all right, so where do you guys think that this environment was? What were one of these environments that would make sense?
Near thermal vents.
Yeah. It's always good to suggest weird things happening around hydrothermal vents. So they looked at specific types of hydrothermal vents, and this created an environment that just fits neatly into what they're saying here. So what they're saying is that it could have been like imagine a primitive cellular system that's plugged into Earth's kind of like geochemical reactor, right? I'm trying to think of analogies how to describe this. Another way to look at it is that part of LUCA's metabolism was the planet itself, essentially, right, with the geochemistry. Joseph Moran from the University of Ottawa, Canada, said, "The closer we look, the more clearly we can see that early biochemical evolution was a hybrid of enzymatic and metal catalysts." I've not heard that before. This was just so fascinating.
That means to me that could have bootstrapped life. Basically, like this whole chicken and egg dilemma is that these primitive cells were relying heavily on chemical reactions happening outside of themselves, right? The primordial soup, they're just sort of swimming in a lot of the stuff that they need for life. And then slowly over time, they evolved the ability to make them inside of their cells, but they weren't dependent on making them internally because there was a huge external source.
Right. That's essentially correct, Steve. So one conclusion that you can arrive to from that is that Luca then was not, an autonomous biochemical factory, if you will, right? It wasn't autonomous. Autonomous. So this would mean then that Luca was not, in fact, an autonomous biochemical factory, if you will. So then my question to you guys is this. Was this protocell alive? Imagine you're a cell. You've got enzymes. You've got half a metabolism that you can do internally, but half of your metabolism needs geochemical reactions to feed into that will then accelerate the chemical reactions that you need. Was such a cell alive?
Yes. I would say yes unequivocally.
I would agree with that as well. But lead author Martin, though, his take on this is that if it couldn't live independently of its geochemical environment, then it doesn't regard it as fully living.
None of us live independent of our environment.
Yeah, I mean that's right. I mean I guess you could, if that's how he interprets it. I mean that's how you interpret it.
Keep in mind, scientists usually go out of their way to interpret the context of their research to maximize its impact and significance. Right.
Right.
So you always have to take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, true. All right, so then what happened next? And Steve, you alluded to what happens next here. And the authors contend that slowly over time, Luca branched off into distinct bacteria and archaea as each of these lineages internalized these environmental reactions. You got that? So they evolved enzymes to replace what the environment was previously doing for them, but they evolved the enzymes differently to perform the same essential chemical reactions.
Right. So Luca was a hybrid, basically.
So right. So you get that. So when bacteria and archaea branched off, they created their own enzymes to do those critical chemical reactions that the geochemistry was performing for probably eons. Okay, so then this means that this full suite of autonomous metabolic machinery evolved after their evolutionary split from each other, and that's one of their key takeaways. So in other words, bacteria and archaea each independently evolved into fully free-living cellular life, which is probably how Martin would characterize this, and that's where those clickbait headlines arise. The ones that say "life arose twice." This is what they mean. The authors are not saying that abiogenesis happened twice independently, which is the conclusion that anyone could naturally reach by reading. That's what I thought when I read the headline, that they're talking about independent abiogenesis, because that would truly be an amazing discovery. That's not really what happened. It's not what they're saying. Bacteria and archaea still evolved from a common ancestral system, and they share the same basic genetic code. William Martin, as I've been referring to before, this senior author of the study, said, "We are looking at one origin of the genetic code, but two origins of life." And again, it's how he's defining life here, being free living, autonomous. That's his definition. But it is one origin of the genetic code, which these titles are going against, right? The titles that say "life arose twice" kind of goes against that. So that's why they're so frustrating. All right. So before I go, guys, I want to quickly go into the researchers also tackled the energy problem, which is another huge one. And that, of course, I'm referring to ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That's the primary energy-carrying molecule found in the cells of all living things. Without ATP, you do not move, you do not metabolize, you do not live. So this is critical. The thing is, though, ATP itself requires enzymes. So what's the energy source for these early metabolisms? If enzymes didn't even exist yet. And they again showed a similar scenario. They showed in this specific case that phosphite found in these hydrothermal environments can drive reactions without ATP or enzymes. So yet once again, we have geology doing a job for countless eons that later biology internalized. So this is what they contend.
Cool.
This is what they believe. It makes sense, and it's just a fascinating idea. So I'll end with this: the tree of life may have not had biological roots, but more of a fusion of geochemistry and biochemical roots. So I'm curious to see, what other scientists are saying about this, and the how robust their research is. But Steve, what do you think? Doesn't this make a lot of sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense, especially.
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, evolution has to bootstrap itself in this sort of way, right? Because
you don't have to make a super complex metabolism right out of the gate. You could just slowly get there as the cell takes on more and more of these chemical reactions and creates its own enzymes and doesn't need geochemistry. So we're transitioning from geochemistry to biochemistry in a slow, methodical way. Perfect sense. It's going from a light spot to a complex eye with a lens. It's just a slow progression of utility.
All right, thanks, Bob. So, guys, have any of you seen the latest release of UFO, so-called UAP videos from the Pentagon?
No, boy.
There's a new release. What the hell's all right? What do we got?
There's going to be more still. They still have a bunch of stuff they haven't released. They're just sort of going through them and releasing them in batches. So it's just as unimpressive as all the other ones. I mean, the one that there's always like one or two that filter up to the top that the media is paying attention to. And this one, it's basically a dot. That's it.
Ooh.
It's a dot on an infrared monitor. And in fact, we're not seeing the data from the monitor. I guess somebody took a video with their cell phone of the monitor, and that's what was released. But I always love the disconnect between how people are describing what we're seeing and what we're actually seeing. You know what I mean? So in this video, this is the cold orb video, right? So you might hear that term. This is the cold orbs. And the release said, the file says, in an accompanying incident report, the blips are described as multiple unidentified aerial phenomena observed maneuvering erratically and in formation. The report states that the objects appear to be flying at low altitudes and to vary in speed between 250 and 1,300 miles per hour with no detected means of propulsion.
Mm-hmm.
So I've looked at it. I've done a careful analysis of the video, and I've come to the conclusion that it is overwhelmingly likely to be, what do you think?
A grain of seed.
It's a bug. It's a bug. It's an insect. There's almost no doubt. I mean, so first of all, it's not multiple.
Bug, classic.
It's not multiple objects flying in formation. I think what they're describing, there's one clear dot. There's a couple of other sort of fleeting dots, but the only thing they could be referring to by the information bit is that what you're seeing is an image trail. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like when you can even make your mouse do this on your computer screen. But like when you see like something moving across a video where it's leaving a ghost trail behind it, right?
Oh, right.
Where progressively fading, it's exactly following the movement of the leading dot. It's clearly that's what that is, just an artifactual image trail, and it's moving in what we would call a stochastic fashion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's one of your words.
Mm-hmm.
It's doing that random bipping about that is typical of a bug, and not sure why any intelligently piloted craft would move in such a way. Now, of course, their estimate of speed is based entirely on their estimate of size, which the person viewing that estimated it was 4 feet in diameter. So, of course, if you think it's 4 feet in diameter, then you must think it's far away and moving very, very fast. But of course, if it's a bug, then it's not. It's very close and moving bug speed, right? So this is just a fly. That's all it is. And this is it. This is all that they got, guys. These like pretty easily debunked artifacts. Did we talk about Disclosure Day, the movie Disclosure Day, on the show yet? Because
I don't think so. I've never seen it.
Don't remember if we did on this show. Did it?
Yeah,
86.
very quickly. This is Spielberg's recent movie about about the government, basically reporters getting a hold of documents, documenting the government's 60 years of hiding their interactions with aliens and alien spacecraft, etc. And at the end of the movie, like we see the disclosure, right? They upload all of the files to the media. And it's, I thought I was completely unimpressed with the movie. I mean, Spielberg is always a good storyteller, so there's always going to be moments that are interesting. But the mild spoiler alert here, the basic plot was, basically every UFO believer's wet dream of what Disclosure Day would be, right? Mm-hmm. It's like all of that stuff, like dramatic, clear alien spacecraft, clear alien interactions, all that kind of stuff, like undeniable alien phenomena.
God, this is like a freaking child's dream. You know what I mean? Like, what the hell?
But the thing is, I'm thinking, if we were talking afterwards, like, wouldn't it have been fun if at the end of that dramatic movie, the disclosure was exactly what the Pentagon actually disclosed, meaning dots and blurbs and shadows and stuff, and that was it.
Yep.
Imagine how fabulously anticlimactic that would have been. But the thing is, that's what Disclosure has actually been. It's all crap. It's all just completely unimpressive crap. If I were still a UFO believer, I would be so fantastically disappointed at the poor quality of the stuff that we're getting as this like big time government disclosure. It's nothing. It's a big nothing burger. Mm-hmm. Anyway, it just shows you they got nothing. Of course, they'll say they're hiding the real stuff, right?
It's so hard on the show. Like, it's funny. I often don't pitch stories like that. I always like tell Steve in advance, like, hey, I've got these like 5 or 6 choices. You choose the ones that seem to fit into the vibe of the show. I often don't pitch stories like this because in my mind, it's really hard to just talk about something that isn't anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's so hard to, I guess it's not really proving a negative, but
it's all about
continues to not be there.
It's about the psychology, it's about the culture, the mythology, the conspiracy thinking, the logical fallacy. It's all about that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And interestingly, we've talked about this at times too. This is like Bigfoot skepticism, where we're basically applying critical thinking and scientific methodology to
microcosm.
To questions that are pretty childish, often are very simple. Like, no, there isn't a Bigfoot roaming around the country. No, the government's not hiding aliens. There's nothing magical going on in the Bermuda Triangle, whatever, all these things. But the thing is, we cut our teeth on a lot of those issues, and you could learn all the lessons of critical thinking and skepticism with these that you then apply to more nuanced and more complicated, or theoretically
more emotional,
can apply.
People that are more emotionally invested, right?
Yeah.
So it's good. I often liken it to like if we see a patient who has an extreme end stage disease, we call in all the medical students to see it, right? Because even though they may never see a patient with that again, it helps them detect and understand the more subtle versions of that disease. So we often will focus on these extreme pseudosciences because it helps you understand, wrap your head around how pseudosciences work so that you can detect them in their more subtle manifestations in things like vaccine denial and global warming denial, things like that. All right, let's move on. Jay, it's Who's That Noisy time.
All right, guys, last week I played This Noisy. Okay. You guys think you know what it is?
I mean, it sounds like you're tapping something crystalline, whether it's metallic or mineral or whatever.
Yeah, like hitting a pipe or something.
Okay, so a listener named Chris wrote in and said, this week's noisy is someone hammering in a grounding rod, right? Essentially like a metal rod. Not a bad guess at all, because there is that metal on metal kind of sound and the hammering, of course. But you're not correct. Another listener named Seth Beach wrote in and said, this week I believe that is a nail gun. I've heard and used nail guns. I don't hear that.
Yeah.
But thank you for guessing. Evil Eye wrote in and said, it sounds like someone having fun using a hammer to play or knock off icicles from their roof. Almost playing the alphabet song, which I had several people say that they hear the alphabet song in that. I did not hear that. And you are not correct, but I do understand, the icicle thing, because they do make kind of those higher pitched sounds. I had about 6 or 7 people guess correctly, but the 2 people who wrote in first, we have Thomas Martin, and then we have Sarah Kalwarowski. They both guessed correctly. but I'm going to tell you what this is. Okay, so we have somebody's hammering something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what do you hear? Do you hear anything happening during the noisy? Like
Steam or like something moving through a pipe or...
You hear like a tonal change, right?
Yeah.
There is a change in the way it sounds at a certain point. And then at the very end, you hear, which I think is the second most important sound that you hear in the whole thing. Let me play it for you again. I'll fast forward just to give you the 3 different stages here. That's the first one. Then it gets to this.
Oh, yeah.
And at the end, you hear that, whoosh, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what this is someone who is splitting a stone.
Oh, cool.
And they're using a hammer and plug and feather wedges. Okay. So the hammer's the hammer. The plug is the metal thing that you're hammering down into the stone, right? They typically will drill or chisel a hole in the stone to get it started, and they have like a stainless steel, like big nail type of thing that they're hitting in there. But there's these thing called feather wedges, which go on opposite sides of the nail, and what they do is as the nail goes down, it pushes these wedges and it helps push the rock apart in certain directions, right? So you have wherever you want the crack to form, these wedges will help that crack form on that line, right? You have to really see a video of this, but it's really cool. So it's kind of interesting to see, I saw a video of a woman who weighed, 100 pounds, just smashing the hell out of a rock and, hitting each nail along the way. So if you have a rock that say is 5 feet across, there'd be every foot, there'd be one of these drilled holes with the nail in it and with those 2 feather wedges alongside each nail. And you hit them and you keep hitting them. And at some point when the tone changes, that's when it's really starting to open up and because you're not hearing that high-pitched metal noise, you're hearing more of a duller metal noise. And then the stone splits and it's usually a very clean split. Wildly used in the history of using stone for buildings and everything, quarries and all that stuff. This is just been done for a very, very, very long time. I thought that was cool. So anyway, I have a new noisy. Steve, if you guess what the new noisy is, I'll give you $1 million.
Okay.
Go ahead. You have to guess it before I play it.
Oh, if I guess what you're going to play before, if I don't get to listen to it first.
That's right. It's $1 million, Steve. What do you want me to do? Hand it out?
I think you're going to play the sound of a lightsaber.
You are incorrect.
Okay.
Kara, I knew you would like that. This noisy was sent in by a listener named Evan Humphrey, and here it is.
Maybe it's that rock right there.
You're getting too close to the ground. Just told me if you scrape, it's an automatic failure.
Yeah.
Now, I could have played this noisy without the people talking, but I left it in there specifically because I think it could help, because I do think that this one is difficult, but I think there's good chunks of information in there that you can pull from. Anyway, if you think you know what this week's noisy is or you heard something cool, you can email me at wtn@theskepticsguide.org. Steve, we've done everything.
Yeah. Did all the things.
I'm literally, as I'm going through, I'm deleting all the links to everything that I've been telling everyone for all these years now. But Steve, we do have a Dragon Con live SGU performance. This will be at the American Hotel. And you can go to theskepticsguide.org for all the details on when and the address and all that stuff. Just go to our website. Kara will not be joining us. It'll be me, Bob, Steve, Christian Hubicki, who we've had on the show. He's a roboticist. And Steve's daughter, Julia, who is going to entertain us with something very interesting that she prepared. And on top of that, Steve, we have all of the things that we're doing at Dragon Con. This is what happened. We get on a call with me, Bob. It was me, Bob, Steve, and Christian. And we let's come up with a bunch of panel ideas. And we came up with a bunch of panel ideas. And we emailed them to all the varying tracks, and we got every single one of them accepted.
Yeah.
So now we're doing a ton of talks, quite a bit. And Kara's like, suckers, I am not doing that crap. My wife and I are also talking about a potential costume idea. I'm not going to say what it is, but I might be in costume for part of that event.
All right. Thanks, Jay.
Yep.
One quick email. This one comes from William from Seattle, who writes, "Is this real?" And then he links to a TikTok video. So right out of the gate, I would say chances are pretty low. But anyway,
Right.
please explain if it is. Love you guys. Been listening for years and saw you in Seattle the last time you were here. All right. So have you guys had a chance to look at this video? It's about a 1,000-year-old remedy. Now, well, I know. If first you're like, Now, the remedy itself is real. This is, It's perfectly fine. The first half of the video is fine, if a little sensational. It's the second half that I have a problem with. But so the video is talking about something called Bald's eye salve. And this comes from a 10th century Anglo-Saxon medical text written in Old English. The name of the text is Bald's Leech Book. It actually has leech in the name. And so that's not just a myth. They actually did use leeches. But anyway, it's for a topical salve that said was for a wen, W-E-N, which is like a lump in the eye, basically like a sty or an infection in the eyelid. And it's made from garlic, then some other allium species. They don't know exactly how to translate it, but it could be either leek or onion, but onion seems to work better, so it's probably onion. So garlic, onion, wine, and oxgall, which is basically bovine bile. You mix those things together, you put it in a bronze container for 9 days, and you got your salve, right? So there was a recent study where they reproduced this, and then they tested it in vitro to see if it had any antibacterial properties, and it does. Then they tested it on mouse wounds, and it works quite nicely. So the combination has two properties that are very complementary. One is that it breaks apart biofilms of bacteria. You know how bacteria, if you get enough of them in one place, they can form this film, which makes it hard for antibiotics to penetrate. But it also has bactericidal activity. So it actually breaks up the film and kills the bacteria. So it works nicely as a topical antibiotic salve. Great. So it's interesting, that they came up with this 1,000 years ago, but, remember, you have to keep in mind, people back then were just as smart as we are today. They didn't know as much, but they were people, right? And when you have hundreds or even thousands of years to work stuff out like this, a lot of societies came up with a lot of natural treatments for stuff based upon things that were in their environment. And through trial and error, they discovered lots of interesting things. So, but then the second half of the video gets into, of course, you're never going to see a pharmaceutical company develop this because it can't be patented and they don't make money on it. And there, maybe you'll see it eventually in an LLM, for a health product or something. All of that, everything she says in the second half of her video about that is nonsense. So actually, it is being developed by pharmaceutical companies. So she's just actually directly wrong about that, even if it can't be patented, but maybe it could be. So what do you think is the main reason why you can't just take this formula, right, and then market it? What would be the main limitation there?
Making sure the ingredients are clean and tested.
You'd have to do work.
Yeah. You'd have to research.
No. So you're going to market a salve made of onion, garlic, wine, and ox bile.
Oh, wouldn't be very shelf stable?
Not shelf stable. Of course, it's not shelf stable at all.
Yeah.
It lasts for just a short period of time, probably like a few days. And then it itself will become infected with mold and bacteria and other things, right? So it's not shelf stable. This is the kind of thing where you make it and then you use it, right? Mm-hmm. So what the pharmaceutical companies are doing is they're trying to identify the actual active ingredients, the active parts of this recipe, and then develop a shelf-stable version of it, right? That would be an actual cream or ointment that you could put in a bottle or a tube, and it will be shelf-stable. So that's what they're doing. That's what they're developing.
Yeah, and they could probably put it in an inert solution so that it's less likely to be, have an allergen or have a side effect or, whatever.
Meanwhile, if you want to make this stuff yourself, go right ahead.
Right, exactly.
You can
But,
actually
like, you can't-
order bovine salts, bile salts online. It's not as hard to come by as you might think. But yeah, as a commercial product, it has. This is what pharmaceutical companies mostly do, by the way, right? Is they identify active ingredients from research or whatever, and a lot of times they are deriving it from natural remedies or from plants or whatever. But you have to come up with a shelf-stable version of it that actually, if it's taken internally, it's got to be bioavailable. This is external, so you don't have to absorb it or anything. It also doesn't have to be internally safe, but it needs to be able to survive long-term in a product, and that takes a lot of R&D, and they can make their money off of that. Also, by the way, pharmaceutical companies can make money off of products that can't be patented. They make maybe about 10% of the profit that they would make on a drug that they have a patent for. But that still could be a lot of money. I mean, Tylenol is still a huge cash cow for the company that makes it, for example. It's been off patent for years. But the question is, here's the problem, is spending the hundreds of millions of dollars to get FDA approval for a product you don't have a patent on. That's where the problem is. But that's why there are like orphan drug laws that will help pay for that. And for something like this, I don't even know that they would need to do that kind of research, right? Because it's not taken internally. The individual components themselves are mostly grass, right? They're you don't have to do research on an onion or garlic, right? The ingredients themselves are all available. So I don't know. It depends, I guess, on what their ultimate formulation is. Totally sounds like something that's completely marketable if they can develop a shelf-stable product. But again, they go right for the conspiracy theory, right? Because that I guess sells TikTok videos.
Yeah. Ugh.
All right, guys, let's go on with science or fiction.
It's time for science or fiction.
Each week, I come up with 3 science news items or facts, 2 real and 1 fictitious. Then I challenge my panel of skeptics to tell me which one is the fake. We have 3 regular news items this week. First time in a while since all the live shows, we have to do more evergreen type of science or fictions.
Yeah.
Just 3 news items. You guys ready?
Yep.
Here we go. Item number 1. A recent study finds that increased screen time in childhood is associated with improved cognitive processing in adolescence. Item number 2. Astronomers have discovered a new type of stellar object, a black hole star, which is a bright red object as large as our solar system and with 1 million solar masses. And item number 3, a new study finds that adding iron to certain ocean ecosystems could increase phytoplankton and permanently sequester as much as 10% of the world's annual CO2 emissions. All right, Kara, go first.
Ugh, this first one about cognitive processing bothers me a lot. I feel like you could make an argument for it, and it's so hard because it's one study. Like, I could see that in a study, increased screen time in childhood could be associated with improved cognitive I mean, how are they defining cognitive processing? It probably also depends on like what they're looking at, and I don't think increased screen time watching, I don't know, horror movies, but maybe watching like educational videos could definitely be improved with cognitive processing. And also increased to what point? 2 hours more than 1 hour, or like 9 hours? That probably is not. So I could see there being enough nuance that would be science, which would leave me with the 2 that I know less about. Okay, so a new type of stellar object, a black hole star. What? A bright red object as large as our solar system and with 1 million solar masses. That doesn't... Okay, so it says dense as 1 million suns, or it says massive as 1 million suns, but it's as large as our entire solar system. What? I don't like this one at all. But then again, I don't know enough about... Like, every time we do a big cosmology one, I'm like, everything sounds insane to me. So, like, at what point are the limits there? Oh, that's bananas. Okay, and then the last one is adding iron to a certain... Okay, again, single study. Iron to a certain ocean ecosystem. Oh, to certain ocean ecosystems, plural. could increase phytoplankton and permanently sequester 10% of CO2 emissions. How would iron work to do that? I mean, it would make like a CO2 sink? Yeah, I mean, that's what you're saying, right? Which one bothers me the most? I think maybe this one bothers me the most. Oh, gosh. Phytoplankton. Maybe the issue here is that, is that a good thing? Yeah, I guess it is a good thing, right? Because phytoplankton are photosynthetic. So you drop iron into the water, the phytoplankton bloom, and then they photosynthesize more. They're all science. I don't know, Steve. You've got me with this one. This one's harder than usual for me. I'm going to say the black hole star is the fiction that maybe there is a black hole star, but it's not nearly as massive as you're saying it is.
Okay, Bob.
I can make sense of the increased screen time one. Sure, yeah, maybe it improves cognitive processing in adolescence, but maybe there's downsides, or what kind of screen time are you talking about? So many unanswered questions there in my mind. Let's see, the black hole star, man, what the hell? Obviously did not see this news item. I want that to be true though, so badly. It's big as the solar. Yeah, I mean, it's the event horizon. Could it be that big with 1 million solar masses? I mean, our Sagittarius A star at the center of the Milky Way has got more than that. I think it's like 5 million solar masses, which is a lot, but also not a lot. And the ecosystem one there, yeah, it looks all good to me, but who knows? Maybe it's too good. More phytoplankton and less CO2. I mean, yeah, so maybe I'll just go with that. That's maybe too good to be true in some ways. So I'll say that the phytoplankton is fiction.
Okay, and Jay.
Okay, the first one, at first blush, I'm like, no way.
No way.
A study finds that increased screen time in childhood is associated with improved cognitive processing in adolescence. You said it's associated with it. And of course, how are they studying this? Like, it has to be where people are just telling the researchers what their screen time use is, which could be wildly inaccurate. All right, whatever. I mean, that one, I don't know. The screen time use could be associated with a lot of stuff. But I have children, you understand. And I see this happening in my house. And I just don't think it's an overall net positive thing. But the first one's vague enough where it could be true. Second one about the black hole, Kara didn't like it and Bob liked it. I just never question if like anything weird that could potentially exist probably like does when it comes to like stars and black holes and things like that. Like this is just a variation. It's pretty cool. I wonder if anyone ever made like an illustration of it to see what it looks like. I don't see any real reason to doubt that. That's the one I'll just say is my definite. So it's between 1 and 3. The last one, a new study finds that adding iron to certain ocean ecosystems could increase phytoplankton and permanently sequester as much as 10% of the world's annual CO2 emissions. So how is that happening? So it makes increasing the number of phytoplankton, and then what? When they get eaten or die, where does that carbon go? Maybe their bodies go to the bottom of the ocean, and then they the thing I don't like about it is the word permanently.
Damn,
right,
I
Kara?
didn't see that.
I hate when it's so an important word.
Yeah.
It also could be that it's 10%. That could be wildly off. Steve likes to mess with those numbers too. I don't like Kara. I don't like any of these.
I know. I liked
Right?
them all.
All right. So Bob said 2 was science, and you said it's fiction, and Bob thinks that 3 is fiction. No one picked the first one. I don't know. I'm leaning more just because the astronomy thing. I'm not going to doubt that there's some black hole out there with a bright red. That is bright red. Like. Who am I to deny that? I'm going to say the third one, Steve, about the phytoplankton and the iron. I think that one is fiction.
All right, you all agree with the first one, so we'll start there. A recent study finds that increased screen time in childhood is associated with improved cognitive processing in adolescence. You all think this one is science, and this one is science. So yes, it's an association because it's an observational study. Obviously, it's how would you do a controlled study? You have to randomize kids to how much screen time they have and enforce it somehow. What the study found was they were looking at, this is from the PANIC study, PANIC. They were looking at both physical activity, sedentary time, nutritional factors, and also screen time. They found, and to their surprise, they found that increased screen time throughout childhood actually was associated with improved measures of cognitive processing in adolescence. That physical activity also associated with improved cognition, and sedentary time had a negative effect. So those things were more expected.
Yeah.
The reason why this could be the case. So first of all, one of the things they conclude was we can't assume that all screen time is bad. A lot obviously would depend on what kind, as I think one of you said, what kind of screen time are we talking about? Yeah. And certain things like video games famously are actually very stimulatory to cognitive function. For example, now we're watching educational programs or things that have any kind of cognitive stimulating factor. And in addition, other possibilities could include releasing neurotrophic factors, altering brain structure, affecting sleep, stress, and anxiety. So there's multiple ways in which screen time may have a beneficial effect on brain development and be manifesting in the teenage years. And this also reinforces something I think we've mentioned before, that when we're talking about interventions to make kids have be more healthy, and including better brain health, that it may not be effective to focus on reducing screen time and instead focus on increasing physical activity to make sure that they're getting a variety of different types of activity and that they're getting enough physical activity, but don't necessarily restrict screen time, because that in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah.
And use the screens, damn it, Dance Dance Revolution.
Yeah.
I think that there are ways to integrate that for sure.
Absolutely. All right, let's go on with number 2. Astronomers have discovered a new type of stellar object, a black hole star, which is a bright red object as large as our solar system with 1 million solar masses. Kara, you think this one is the fiction. Bob and Jay think this one is science. And this one is science. This is science.
Wow,
Bob, I'm kind of surprised. I thought there was a coin flip that you would have seen this, because this has been all over the news for the past.
Oh my God, yeah, because I found my news item today from a link I had put down recently. So I didn't really take a deep dive in the news, and I would have seen that and devoured it. In fact, I'm kind of pissed because I want to cover that, and I got to wait to get the okay to cover that, because now it's part of science fiction.
Let's cover it right now. It's very interesting. So first of all, we're talking about an object in the very young universe, right? So these are things that are very far away, therefore very far back in time. We're talking about hundreds of millions of years after the Big Bang. I think this one is within the first 700 million years. The astronomers have seen previously these really bright point objects, right? They're red, they're extremely bright, and they're point objects, so they're not like galaxies. Now, normally when something is very red, what is the cause of that? What causes the light to be so red?
Dust.
Dust.
Like dust.
Right, yeah. Dust absorbs the blue light, and so it passes through the red light. But that causes a certain spectral pattern that they were not seeing here. What they were seeing was something called a Balmer break. Have you ever heard that term before?
I have. I've heard of that.
Yeah, so it essentially means that the light is not being absorbed by dust, it's being absorbed by hydrogen, right? And so you get a break in the spectrum at a specific location, which indicates that hydrogen is what's absorbing that light and causing it to be red. And we only see those in stars, right? So now we're looking at, okay, so there's this really, really bright object surrounded by a lot of hydrogen, and it's a lot of clean hydrogen, meaning it's not a lot of dust in with that hydrogen. So what would do that? So what they found is that they used simulations to test these hypotheses, is that, okay, what if there is a black hole at the center of this object that we're seeing, and it's surrounded by a massive envelope of pure hydrogen and helium, basically at the hydrogen and helium percentage of the universe, right? And that fit what they were observing. It fit the Balmer break in the spectrum that they were seeing. And it exactly explains what was being observed. They estimate the size of it and the mass of it, and that's where they came up with those numbers. This also solves potentially solves a mystery, and that is, how did the primordial supermassive black holes, right? The supermassive black holes at the early universe. How did they grow so big so fast? So this suggests, well, maybe that's because they developed out of these objects, these black hole stars. Because imagine a dense envelope the size of our solar system of hydrogen and helium, and the black hole at the center is actively feeding on it. So, Kara, how do you think they figured out that this could not be just a giant star?
Something else around it?
No, there was some feature of it that you cannot explain with nuclear fusion.
I have no idea.
It was way too bright.
Oh.
It's producing about 1 billion times as much, or more than that. It's like billions of times, tens of billions of times as much energy as you could produce through fusion of hydrogen. So this isn't just a star. It's not glowing bright red because it's a star. The only thing that creates that energy is a black hole. So they knew that the energy source was a black hole.
The energy would be coming from an accretion disk?
Yes, exactly.
And why wouldn't that accretion disk overshadow the entire, because it's, all the hydrogen?
It's getting filtered through a solar system size dense envelope of hydrogen.
It must be very dense.
It's very dense.
How did that black hole get there? I mean, what was the evolutionary history of that whole thing? It's a black hole, so it was a star. It was a heavy, like at least 8 solar mass star.
Or maybe not, Bob. Maybe it formed some other way in the.
Well, that's just it. That's just it. I mean, I'd love to see the speculation on how this got to be what we're seeing.
And if there's one, there have to be more.
There are.
Right?
There are. This has been like they've been seeing these bright red dots, and they don't know what they are. And this is one that they were able to have enough data to this, and this is all coming from.
Well, they're obviously BRDs, Steve. I mean, what's the problem?
Yeah, right. These are the observational data is coming from. What do you think?
Oh, JWST.
Yep, the Webb, James Webb Telescope. Yep, absolutely. So we will be seeing more of these.
So friggin' cool, man.
Now, I was curious.
Look, here's a new stellar object.
Yeah, it's a new stellar object. You don't see them every day. That, of course, caught my eye. A black hole star. Now, I was wondering, so if this is a super dense envelope of hydrogen, could there be fusion happening in that envelope of hydrogen? And the answer is no. Yeah, because as dense as it is, it's still orders of magnitude less dense than a core of a star, where you need that gravitational confinement. Again, way more than you can get in this kind of envelope to create a significant amount of hydrogen fusion. So no significant fusion. It's all coming from the accretion disk of a black hole at the center, causing this hydrogen gas to glow but create that sort of spectral pattern of just hydrogen that we usually see from a star. All right. That means that a new study finds that adding iron to certain ocean ecosystems could increase phytoplankton and permanently sequester as much as 10% of the world's annual CO2 emissions is fiction. And Jay, you hit upon both reasons why it's fiction.
Whoa.
Wow.
Way to go, Jay.
Because it's not permanent. More than half of that CO2 is eventually re-released into the atmosphere. And it's more like 1%. It's not 10%.
Oh my God!
So very cool.
It's
See, I know all about phytoplankton. Steve.
Well, so the idea though is an interesting one. So in some places around the globe, the production of phytoplankton is limited by nutrients, and specifically iron. So the thinking is, well, if we just feed it the rate-limiting nutrient, iron, that would cause a phytoplankton bloom, right? As Akara said, the photosynthesis would fix a lot of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Then they fall down to the bottom of the ocean, and we have an easy way of sequestering CO2. Several problems emerged from this. It did work in some places better than others. The Southern Ocean is probably the best place, like around Antarctica. But several problems. One is it's pretty tiny amount of CO2. It's 1% about of what we release every year. So this is not a replacement for reducing emissions of CO2, right? Second, it has a lot of knock-on effects in the ecosystem because that phytoplankton bloom uses up a lot of other nutrients that are now not available available for the rest of the ecosystem. So it causes basically nutrient poor water in the ocean, so that's bad. And then 3, it doesn't seem to be permanent, that it gets, most of it gets re-released anyway. So, could this play some role at some point in helping us balance the CO2 in the atmosphere? Maybe, but this is if anything ever going to be a minor player, not any kind of significant solution. All right, so good job, Jay and Bob.
Thank you.
Bob, give us a quote.
Yes. All right. Tell people there's an invisible man in the sky who created the universe, and the vast majority will believe you. Tell them the paint is wet, and they have to touch it to be sure. George Carlin.
That's so good.
Oh my God.
That whole bit is hilarious.
I miss George. And this quote is, of course, about standards of evidence, right?
Yeah.
Carlin's pointing out, obviously, here that people frustratingly often accept an enormous claim that's unfalsifiable without demanding any direct evidence at all. But for mundane claims, they often require immediate, empirical confirmation. It's totally back-asswards. It's just totally like, no, you got to reverse that there, people. But so my takeaway is just listen to some more George Carlin.
Yeah. He was very, very, very funny, very, very brilliant comedian. And also, I think this has a lot to do with culture, right? It's that we believe things that are part of our cultural tribe, that are embedded in society, in our people that we live with. Whereas something that has no emotional investment, you will exhibit a robust and often appropriate amount of skepticism. But we just don't when it's a tribal in supporting beliefs. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining me today, and welcome back from Down Under. We're back to our usual schedule.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm not jet lagged at all. I'm fine.
It took me about a week to get over the jet lag. The jet lag wasn't the big problem. As you could probably hear, I'm sick. A lot of us got viruses while we were away. Mine sort of kicked in later, and I think I might have gotten a super infection, so I'm still getting over it. But I was the last week we used one of our shows that we had recorded live last week. Thank goodness. I basically spent a week as a zombie. I was completely jet lagged and sleep deprived. I couldn't make up for my sleep deficit because I couldn't sleep because I had a cold and I was coughing all the time. It was just I accomplished absolutely nothing for an entire week.
Yikes. I had about a day. It's interesting. Like usually my jet lag isn't so bad because of the meds that I take. And in Australia, I had no jet lag. But when I got home, I had about a day where I slept for like the whole day. Did you guys do that too?
Oh, yeah.
I just could not stay awake. I just kept falling back asleep.
Yeah, the next day I had 3 hours from basically I took a quick 4-hour nap when I got home at 9 a.m. But then from 2 to 5, I was just like,
and that travel day, Kara, for us, that travel day was like a 40-hour day because
you guys got stuck and
so
super
bad.
delayed.
Steve,
Oh God, so much drama.
Was 41 hours for me, and Jay. No, me basically, but you were a little bit even longer because you had to
42, 43, door to door. It was like 42 hours of travel, but also it was a super Monday because it was add 13 hours or 14 hours, whatever, to the day itself.
Super evil Monday. Yeah. It sucked. We got stuck in LAX. They canceled our flight home, right? So Sydney to LAX.
A 10 or 11 hour delay.
LAX canceled our flight to JFK. And we sat there from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Oh, God. I felt so bad. My partner and I, we went straight home. I had to work. We're back at the house. He's napping. I'm seeing all the texts coming through. And I was like, oh, no, I can't help you. I wish I could help you.
But of all the flights, I'm glad it was the last leg. Because
you're right.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't miss any connecting flights. We didn't miss any events or anything.
That's
that was one of any other flight. It could have been a much bigger problem.
Basically any other one.
Yeah.
The problem is LAX is literally the worst airport. I mean, most American airports are pretty terrible. But
it does particularly suck.
Yeah.
Because I walked that airport. I know LAX really well now.
I hope you at least spent time in the international terminal because that's where the good food and stuff is.
Well, we ended up getting into the
a lounge,
the Delta Sky Lounge because Steve has an American Express card and we finagled our way in there.
That's the way to do it because then you can just sleep.
Relax. You could even take a shower, which was pretty slick.
Which don't make it sound like it wasn't hard, Bob, because it sucked.
It sucked a little bit less because of that.
Right.
Sucked
less.
You go.
Takeaways.
All right. Well, we're all home safe now. And again, thank you guys for joining me this week. And until next week, this is your Skeptic's Guide to the Universe.
Skeptic's Guide to the Universe is produced by SGU Productions, dedicated to promoting science and critical thinking. For more information, visit us at theskepticsguide.org. Send your questions to info@theskepticsguide.org. And if you would like to support the show and all the work that we do, go to patreon.com/skepticsguide and consider becoming a patron and becoming part of the SGU community. Our listeners and supporters are what make SGU possible.